Senior Narrative Designer at Deep Silver Dambuster Studios. And the first question was, what changed, if anything, when Deep Silver acquired the studio that is now Dambuster? And the answer is, well, I wasn't there for the transition. There wasn't the sort of turbulence that perhaps people on the outside perceived happening. The team that's working on the game now is the same team that has been on this title since it began its inception as a project under THQ.
How long has been the game in development?
Homefront The Revolution has been in development for about 4 years. It originally began as a direct sequel to the first Homefront under THQ, and it was, like the first game, a very linear, scripted corridor shooter. So when Dambuster acquired the rights to the IP, they decided, given the systems that we want to feature, given the story that we want to tell, and given this fantasy of being a guerrilla fighter, doesn't it make more sense to take it open world? And the answer was absolutely. So that previous version was scrapped, and they began anew on the game that we currently have here at Paris Games Week, which is much more open, much more systems driven, and I believe really leverages that fantasy of being a guerrilla fighter. Because when you're in a corridor shooter, you encounter a group of enemies, and the only direction that you can move is forward. So you kill everyone on screen, and then you keep going on the roller coaster. Whereas when you have an open world, you can choose to attack from any direction. You can choose when to start the attack. And again, part of that guerrilla fantasy is sort of an increased difficulty. We want the player to feel vulnerable. We want them to be afraid. We want it to feel like you might not win every firefight that you get into. So you want to pick your battles very carefully and assess your environment for the best tactical advantages. You know, maybe I don't want to, if I see a patrol coming down the street, maybe it doesn't make sense to just open fire immediately. Maybe I should climb up into a second floor window and wait for them to pass underneath.
So there are more tactical options this way.
Many more tactical options. The other interesting thing is that unlike a lot of other games in the open world or first-person shooter genre, our systems are designed so that when the reinforcements arrive, they're overwhelming. It starts off with a couple of foot soldiers, but rapidly there are drones, there are vehicles, there's airships hovering overhead, and so that when you get spotted, you quickly realize that your position is completely untenable. You can't stay there, and so you run away. And running away is something that you don't do often in first-person shooters. And again, thanks to being an open world, and in part because now you're making all of those tactical assessments of your environment, you will know, okay, I've got a fire escape behind me that leads up to a roof, that leads over to another roof, that leads down to a sewer. So if things go south, and if I can't win this fight, I've got 4 or 5 different directions that I can escape to. And it leads to a very, very interesting and very different style of gameplay where you hit a target and then you evacuate the area as quickly as possible.
So basically, if you are on a mission, let's say you are on a mission and then you decide to escape, what happens? Do you have to do it again from the start?
No, not at all. Even within our demo that we've got here at Paris Games Week, we start the player out on a mission to give them some context and some concrete objectives to take in order to introduce them to the style of gameplay and the world. However, again, players can approach those objectives from any direction and using any of the tools that we've provided them. So if you encounter, you do have to complete that first ambush, but once you're there, you can navigate to the second part of that mission any way you want. And in fact, there are actually about 5 or 6 different ways that I can name to complete the first part, which is an ambush of a vehicle patrol. So, when you encounter a group of enemies and you run away, that doesn't fail the mission. That just means that you are now taking a different course to that objective. And that happens fairly frequently throughout your playing of the game. We present the player with a lot of small obstacles or micro challenges. And again, give them a lot of tools and ask them to make a tactical decision to overcome it or get around it. Sometimes engaging in combat, not engaging in combat is the best option. If you see a patrol and you know that you can duck down an alley and behind a building and not have to deal with them at all, that's a totally valid strategy.
So, of course, the stealth approach is important in the game. And about the city, of course, of Philadelphia, how big is it? I mean, in terms of size, roughly, of course.
It's difficult to assess how big it is in terms of size. The way that the world is broken up is into various zones. So we have red zones, yellow zones, and green zones. The red zones, which is the demo we have here, is much more of a bombed out, sort of chaotic area where the enemies, when you encounter them, will shoot on sight. It's been declared off limits. And so that leads to a lot of unscripted gunfights in the streets and those sort of crazy chases where you've got vehicles pursuing you through buildings, and you've got the motorbike to take it up, on the streets or up onto the rooftops if you want. And then in the yellow zones, it's much more of a cat and mouse style of gameplay, where their first inclination is not to shoot on sight, it's to come over and investigate. And there's many more civilians in the area. And so you're using a bit different of a style to accomplish your objectives. Rather, it's an area where you don't even want to have a gun drawn, because you'll just send everyone running in fear. So you do a bit of crowd blending, you do more sneaking through apartments and climbing over roofs to get to your objective, and then if you get spotted, you're chased and you have to hide or escape that way. And then the green zones are where we have a lot of our big set-piece missions, and they feature the landmarks of Philadelphia, like Independence Hall, the Liberty Bell, and that's really the heart of the occupational administration, and it's where their most valuable targets are located, but it's also going to be the toughest part of the city to break into. So players will find travel options between these various zones, and using old subway tunnels or sewers or tunnels that the Resistance has dug, they'll start out in one red zone, they'll crawl down through a tunnel and pop out in a yellow zone, which will be completely different in terms of the art style, the architecture, and then even the gameplay.
Okay, so of course, without spoiling too much, can you tell us a bit about the story of the game, a little bit?
It's tough to talk about the story without spoiling too much, but we put the player in the boots of a Resistance fighter named Ethan Brady. And obviously the goal is to liberate Philadelphia from the North Korean military occupation. And it's not the North Korean military that we know from the news today. We've gone back in time and changed a number of key historical events that sort of branch off into an alternate timeline that leads us to this point where North Korea is technologically and militarily far more advanced. And so by going out on these missions and by performing a lot of smaller actions, small sabotage, destroying bricks and cameras, you will weaken the Korean stranglehold on the city and also inspire the populace to rise up alongside you in revolution.
So how long will it take to complete the story, approximately? How many hours of gameplay?
Again, it's sort of difficult to say right now exactly how long the campaign will take to complete. I will, however, say that I've been demoing this one small section of the game now for a few months, and every time I have a free moment, I hop back on it and I play it. So I've probably put about 30 hours into just this one small section, and I'm constantly finding new things that I didn't know were there, that the level designers have added, just small things that have changed. And my hope is that when the game is released in spring of 2016, it's not so much about how much time the campaign offers, or it's how much time do you want to spend playing it. Hopefully our systems and our story are compelling enough that you will want to spend quite a bit of time in our world.
Right. Does the game have a day-night cycle?
The game has a day-night cycle. We have a dynamic weather system as well, and one of the smaller touches that has absolutely no gameplay value at the moment is when it rains, there are puddles that form in the street, and then when the sun comes out, those puddles slowly dry up. I mean, it's hard to encourage players to stand there and watch water evaporate, but it's one of those little touches that we've added that really makes the city feel very vibrant and dynamic and alive. So we've also got a lot of other interesting things going on with our rendering, with our particle system, and the goal is that every time the player enters an area, whether it's day, whether it's night, whether it's raining, whether it's foggy, whether it's clear, you get a very, very interesting and visually arresting scene, and that's your playground.
Okay, does the game have physically based rendering?
We do have physically based rendering, and we have lit particles. Some of the more technical aspects I'm not totally up to date on, and we're constantly adding new things to CryEngine 3 and optimizing it to really get the most out of all of the hardware that we've got available to us.
All right. So I'll ask you these questions, maybe you know the answer or not. Can you tell us, for the console versions of the game, can you tell us what kind of frame rate resolution are you targeting?
We're targeting 30 frames a second on consoles, and on PC it's whatever hardware you've got that you can throw at it. We're obviously constantly optimizing the engine, and again, like I said, trying to make the most out of the hardware. So those numbers shift depending on where we are in development, but again, our final target is 30 on consoles.
And the resolution will it be Full HD on both consoles?
To the best, again, I don't have an exact answer for that, but it will be, as far as I know, Full HD.
All right. Do you know if the PC version of the game will support DirectX 12, or are there any plans for that?
That's a good question, and it's a technical one, and I don't actually have an answer for that. However, I will get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. Last few questions. Maybe you didn't talk about this. I mean, a studio yet, but if there is anything you can say or even hint about the chance of multiplayer in the game.
I would be happy to talk about multiplayer because we have announced it. We have a 4-player cooperative multiplayer mode.
Okay.
So you and 3 of your friends can join together, form your own resistance cell, and you create your own resistance fighter. Go out on narratively driven missions where you'll use the same tools and tactics that you use in the single-player campaign. Acquire new gear, come back, maybe switch up your strategy, and eventually become heroes of the revolution. And I'm really looking forward to getting a chance to, 1, play it myself, and 2, have others join me. We'll have a closed beta this winter, and some more information on how you can get into that in the coming weeks. But again, it's so much fun to have that cityscape and have all of those options available to you, and to have 3 of your friends there whispering over the headsets, okay, you know, you want to play as the sniper, so we're gonna do this quietly this time. And you go and you do it, maybe it works, maybe it fails spectacularly, and then you come back and you're like, okay, new plan, I want to get on the motorbikes and just throw Molotov cocktails at everyone. That's totally cool too.
So multiplayer is only cooperative, or is there also a competitive side to it?
It's a cooperative multiplayer.
Okay. And you can do the entire campaign with your friends, or?
It's a separate experience to the campaign. But again, it uses all of the same elements that you'll find in the single player.
Okay. So I'd say that covers most of it. So thank you.